Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I guess I want to talk about the damage that going so long without being diagnosed with ADHD has as an effect on a person. Not just undiagnosed ADHD, but also ADHD that isn't properly managed or treated in any way at all. And I don't just mean with medication, I mean with therapy, or I don't know, some people say things like exercise is really, really good for ADHD, but getting myself to exercise is like another matter on its own. But I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 27 years old, and I also have some aspects of my personality that might naturally be seen as having ADHD, like being a creative seeker type of person. I start and stop things when I lose interest in them. But there's some things that I've always stuck with, some things that have always interested me, and so it's not that I can't finish projects and stuff anymore. It's more like if I begin a project and there's just no spark there anymore, and I just can't get back to the place that I was, or I just lose interest, then I do stop doing it. And that is a part of my personality, I've come to realize, and not just because of the separate ADHD part. This long without knowing that you have ADHD is problematic in itself. And I never really let on to anybody that I was struggling, and I think that's one of the things. Like, if you are struggling, like, you can talk to people about it. Like, I think when you're at school, I was too afraid to speak to my teachers or even my parents about some of the stuff that I struggled with, and so I would hide and mask what was going on, which can cause a lot of frustration. And so one of the main things that I actually experienced through having ADHD, the secondary things, wasn't just sort of like having anxiety and mood issues and stuff like that. It was the frustration that I felt, and the inability to be and to exist in this world like everybody else does. And so I'd have these high standards on myself of how you're supposed to be, because I'd be comparing myself to other people, and if I didn't match up, then I would automatically think that I'm some kind of failure, something's wrong with me. And obviously there was something wrong with me, but I didn't actually really understand what that was or where that was coming from. I just thought that maybe I was stupid, or I put myself down a lot. I thought I was stupid and silly as a person. And I saw a therapist once, and she was like, "You've got to stop saying that you're silly." And in my head, I would say that all the time. And I don't actually say that anymore, really. I am still super self-critical as a person, and I don't know if that's going to change. That's something that I want to change, but I also see the advantages of being highly critical, or at least somewhat critical, of myself and systems and other things. And I see some advantages of it, but obviously there's some disadvantages there too. So basically, it can lead to a lot of things that people might consider like trauma, or just not being able to live up to what they feel that they're supposed to. And I think this is a common thing amongst humans in general anyway, but in particular when you have ADHD and you're dealing with the effects of that ADHD, it can be problematic. And the impulsivity, what I'm going to talk about in particular, because I actually read some statistics online that people with ADHD generally live shorter lives, like they have a shorter lifespan due to, I'm going to give a massive trigger warning here, so if you don't want to hear this information, then don't, because it's about dying and suicide and stuff like that. So it's estimated that people with ADHD live 13 years less than people who don't have ADHD. And suicide is one of those reasons. And not just suicide, but people can get into drugs more easily, which makes sense because of the lack of dopamine, and these drugs can provide that dopamine. And then all kinds of dangers and everything surrounding it. So some people hyperfocus when they drive, so I don't want to just say that everybody with ADHD is a bad driver or is super distracted when they're driving, because that is not the case at all. But if you're super distracted as a driver, like myself, I was quite distracted as a driver. Before I started taking medication, music would help me a lot with that, and I could kind of hyperfocus with the aid of the music, and that's something that's kind of stayed with me a little bit, which I really like. And so I would only take short journeys. I wouldn't drive for hours, but now I can drive for hours and be focused and feel safe doing so. So car accidents as well is another one. Crime, being involved in sort of like more high adrenaline kind of things, which I personally was very not interested in. And yeah, it makes sense that people with ADHD can be led down the wrong path, and it's estimated, and I'm not sure what the percentage is, but quite a lot of people not the majority, but quite a few people who end up in prison actually have undiagnosed or diagnosed ADHD, which is, again, not a huge surprise to me. But yeah, I mean, they're the more serious things that can happen, obviously, and it depends on the severity of your ADHD and what the symptoms or the traits are, like the ones that you deal with more, because it can vary from person to person. And then obviously it's the way other people treat you as well. People might treat you differently. You may feel different to other people, and it can lead to isolation and loneliness, feeling that something's wrong with you but you can't quite figure out what it is. And yeah, it can lead you down a path that you might feel quite ashamed. Like I used to be very ashamed of myself. Like I used to be super messy, and I'm still a messy person. Like I think if I really wanted to actively change that, I could change that now, because I'm on medication, and in some ways I am a tidier person for sure. Like my desk generally stays tidy, because I can just put stuff back where they belong rather than just leaving them and not realising that my desk is a mess until days later. But like my car can still become quite messy, for example, and I used to be so ashamed that somebody would see that and judge me because of it, and before people would come around my house I would have to do a massive cleanup of everything, because my mind was just so scattered all the time, and I just wasn't unable to do that unless I was under pressure, and that was the pressure, like somebody's coming around my house, oh no, I have to like get a move on, basically. And there's a lot of damage that can come from not being diagnosed until you're a lot older. Sorry, I was just seeing if that was for me. And then there's the whole process. Like you can take medication, and medication works so well, but then afterwards you still have like things that you can personally implement into your life to make your life better and your mindset better. I think that's the most important thing, is the mindset work that you can do afterwards. Mine has happened quite naturally. My partner's helped me like talk through certain things, help me with certain things, to manage certain things in my life, which has helped me a lot. I also he does all my budgeting and stuff like that for me, so I'm very lucky to have him, and like he enjoys doing that sort of thing. He's happy to do it, so I'm very grateful that I have someone like that. I think he prefers to do it actually, and I've been better off. I make lots less impulsive purchases anyway now, but there's a whole realm of different things that you can sort of look into, and work you can do, mindset work, to boost your self-esteem. And that's something I've kind of touched on, but sort of like the self-esteem aspect. People with ADHD, diagnosed or even undiagnosed or even diagnosed in some cases, will have that low self-esteem because, again, they're not, they don't think that they're living up to the standards of what you're supposed to, and they might say things sometimes that come out wrong, and you might be able to pick up on little clues of people around you, like, okay, I'm coming on too strong with that person, or something like that, that makes you feel like, oh, actually I do that quite a lot, and then you feel bad every time you do it. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of self-esteem issues that go along with ADHD. I think that's a really huge one actually. And so there's a lot of like mindset work you can do yourself. You don't necessarily need to see a therapist to do these things, but you can as well. Like, I saw a therapist before I knew I had ADHD, and she helped me a lot with many different things, including my self-esteem. I've seen coaches as well. Coaches are really, really beneficial. So if you can afford those sort of things, or if you can get them for free, even better. But obviously it does take a lot of, it can take some expense to go down those routes, and there are tools available online. If you just search, there's tools available to help you with these sort of things, and it's still an ongoing process for me, and sort of like, it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of experimenting to see what works for you, and getting to know your personality beyond like ADHD. So yeah, I wanted to touch on this because I think a lot of people also put down people who take ADHD medication, when in fact ADHD medication doesn't make you so for example, one like meme I saw online was sort of like how, I think I might have shared it on my meme video, was how a normal person taking ADHD medication, meaning stimulants, would be really affected, like, and it would make them stay up all night and all of this, but somebody with ADHD, it would just make them act or be able to like deal with normal life better. And yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions around that really do my head in. But yeah, I wanted to share that because I think that's important. I think it's important not to shame people who take medication. So much misinformation about that around still, and opinions that are just unwanted by the ADHD community. And it puts people down, and it makes people feel like they shouldn't go on medication. And that's totally a personal decision, for sure, and you don't have to take medication, obviously, but it's still, in my opinion, the first method of treatment that an adult should think about, really, because it is, oh wow, there's a robin. Oh, it's so pretty. Sorry. You know, it is that first point of call that really helped me, so that's probably why I advocate for it a lot. So I would love to hear sort of like your experiences, your thoughts on this, if there's anything that's helped you that you want to share down below, or anything that you really struggle with post diagnosis, post medication, or even when you weren't diagnosed, because it can be really difficult and you can be struggling with life really like a lot, without really knowing what's going on and why you feel this way. So I hope everyone's doing really, really well today, and I will see you again in the next video.